Welcome back to another episode of Patch Note Reviews with RickyRister and Purplemurasaki. And this month, we got quite a few number of cards to talk about. And we also will talk about the pre-GP patch of last month, since we didn't talk about those things when they came out.
Yeah, so first, talking about this month's changes. There's a couple of pretty minor ones. Commands getting wording updates so they don't fizzle as often. Blazing outro being fixed before anyone can play it while it's broken due to its interactions with alternate casting costs. Canopy Dancer got changed because it has a random infinite. Not that it was like especially great, but just a designer change.
Hey, I mean, someone tried to run it in a GP deck, and did it work? I'm not sure if it worked very well, but, you know, at least had some fun.
Yeah. Then we have Maktali, the Great Library, getting a minor cost reduction on the last ability. Still not really constructed playable, unless if you really want to talk about fringe playables.
Yeah.
Not a bad card, but just not really a card that any decks wants. Poisoned Well is kind of similar, where it does fetch any land, but it's the 3-mana sorcery that puts a land to play tapped, and also hurts you.
Yeah.
So there's kind of the question of, well, first of all, why are you not playing green? Is it probably less costly on your life to play green? And secondly, there's also stuff like Gate of Realms if you want that.
Yeah.
We did get a couple of unbans / reworks for a few cards. The first of which is Sentinel of Latter Days, which all the cycling abilities cost 1 more now, which makes this card kind of unplayable, I think.
Yeah. Is the changeling ability ever relevant?
I mean, you can fetch Doctrine MSA, which is kind of funky, but yeah, that's about it.
Okay.
Maybe there's some like quirky thing you can do with it being in library, but I think the cycling abilities are probably just not really worthwhile, since there are just kind of better cyclers for zombies, wizards, and warriors, where they actually have a real body, so the 4-mana 3/3. And then elves have Laurel Leaf as a searcher, so they don't really need this type of searcher, even if it is a bit cheaper. And then soldiers, 2 manas, a lot for generally how aggressive soldiers are. If you want multiple creature types, it's probably alright though. It is instant speed, which is nice.
Yeah, but like, again, what deck is running multiple creature types that you want to tutor for at 2 mana, right?
Yeah, it's almost more of like a kind of like deck building problem at this point. Well, I'm not going to say that no deck can play this card, but I think it's more of just like, oh, it just so happens that I managed to play this like very hyper-specific like Silver Bullet deck or combo deck that Sentinel of Latter Days happens to fetch everything I need, and it also happens to be better than Gap of the Pack and whatnot, which seems unlikely given how diverse creature types are, but I suppose it's possible.
Yeah.
Perhaps a more interesting unban is Chigau, which got no changes except for wording update, which prevents you from casting adventures off of it, which is basically just a rules quirk, really. But now you can't, so kind of a moot point. So just to start things off, I think Chigau is probably just fine balance-wise. I don't think it necessarily like breaks anything. I think you probably played 2 to 3, probably like 3 copies in 75 of black decks that have good creatures get back. But it is kind of a bit on the expensive side, does need a bit of specific matchups. Maybe I'm underestimating it. I do actually kind of hate this card.
Yeah.
Because this is like the epitome of like the Magic that I don't like, where very repetitive, hard to answer kind of Magic, where just between the draw card and ETB, meaning that even if you have the perfect answer for it, it still 2-1s you. Like targeted Grave Fate not being that great against it, since if you don't exile every creature in the yard before the trigger resolves, then they just name the creature that's left in the yard and can cast it immediately, since you don't get a chance to respond between them choosing the name and them being able to cast the creature. It kind of makes like situations where it's pretty easy to get like top deck out of the game. So if you like manage to deal with the creature they name with Chigau and they top deck another one, but that's just too bad. You have to deal with it again. Obviously, it's not doing much against, like, say, aggro, and mid-range decks definitely have enough kind of velocity to get over it. But at the same time, if it takes over a game, it takes over the game. And I think it does that in a very uninteresting way.
Yeah, so what kind of creatures are you expecting to get back from this thing?
I think in general, like, you really just want kind of annoying creatures that no deck really wants to deal with. Profane MSA and Infectious Ego are probably the 2 most generic options.
Yeah.
If you want to get kind of more abusive with it, so Wicked of Takesh being a repeatable edict is really nasty. Definitely one of the things I think you want from a creature you name with Chigau is that you want to basically force your opponent to kill it. So Infectious Ego obviously has that property. Profane MSA does a lot of damage. Soulbreaker here actually has the poisonous be relevant, funny enough, because it kills pretty quickly with just the poisonous alone. So it does incentivize block pretty quickly. Also kind of hard not to kill it because it's 3-1. There's also stuff like Sangjin being a good card to get back because Sangjin has flash, so you can cast on your turn and the opponent's turn, get a lot of ramp. You can also legend rule Sangjin to make sure you always have one engrave if you drew 2. So if you really want to like go all in on this get infinite Sangjins plan, you can even go into red, play Tali's Council, you fetch Sangjin and Chigau, and then that flash interaction also kind of works with Mattia and Commanding Princess. Mattia being a really annoying threat to deal with, Commanding Princess being a really good interactive threat, and in the case that you don't need Commanding Princess to block or do a ton of work on the board, Commanding Princess can also hit herself with the deal the damage ability to ensure that you have a Commanding Princess engraved to cast. And yeah. But I think in general, at least personally, I think I prefer Chigau not to be in the format, even without seeing it in play. Just because I think a lot of the space it kind of covers is also space that more interesting cards exist in. So like Sophia and Seasons War. But yeah.
Yeah. So another card that got unbanned but got reworked, so it's basically a new card. So Aether Leak. So on first glance, it looks like some sort of value tool, like you can play ETB creatures. For example, if you play a Lore Spell, it'll let you draw 2 cards off of it. I mean, I don't know why I mentioned Lore Spout specifically.
Like your 1-mana draw streams? It feels like it sounds like you're under the gun here. Like Purplemurasaki is forcing me to say Lore Spout's good.
Well,
the only reason I played 3 and 8 seconds because they were holding a gun to my head when I seen my deck list.
Well, actually, Lore Spout's relevant because of the changes we're going to talk about next with Green-White Creature Vomit, but we were thinking about splashing blue into Green-White Creature Vomit after the nerfs in order to get the Lore Spout interaction with Aether Leak.
Yeah, very briefly. It also has nice synergy with Core Light Champion, since getting 2 short Core Light Champion boards is pretty nasty if you have a decently sized board.
Yeah. But either way, we actually spent quite some time brainstorming about this card, but then Purplemurasaki found some way to break it again.
Yeah, just like going through the blue ETB creatures, which is a pretty natural way to kind of look at this card because it's blue and it interacts with ETB creatures. Yeah, there's a bunch of kind of very natural stuff like Ancestral Council. Obviously, you don't care about the 1/1 that much. You'd prefer to get another ETB trigger. And another kind of interesting card with it is Pensive Songwriter, which is seeing some somewhat degenerate use in an updated version of 8-Sack, where it can get very quickly to 5 drops and see a whole bunch of play there. It's also really good here because it happens to go infinite with the combination of Aether Leak and Confirm Hypothesis.
Yeah, so you play out Aether Leak on turn 2, and then you play out Pensive Songwriter on turn 3. Aether Leak triggers and copies it, so now you have 2 Pensive Songwriter triggers on the stack, and then you have a Confirm Hypothesis in hand. And yeah, that just goes infinite, because you can keep using Confirm to copy one of the Pensive Songwriter triggers, and then you just draw your entire deck that way. And then I guess throwing a Lab Maniac or some Voidbringer or something at the end, so just win the game that way.
Yeah, and importantly, by the point that you've drawn your deck, you still have 2 Pensive Songwriters on the stack. So if you want to, you can go like Ardy's Invocation into Azun's play. Just kill you on a spot.
That also works, huh?
Like there's some pretty arbitrary ways you can kill someone with your entire deck in hand plus 2 2-drop instant sorceries being free cast.
And you know what the funny thing is? This isn't the first time Confirm Hypothesis has led to an infinite. In fact, that's the reason it even got nerfed in the first place, to exile itself.
Yeah, with
Titanic Fossil.
Yeah, but that's a pretty solid 3-card combo. And isn't even that intractable in general? Because you don't even get a chance to try and kill the Pensive Songwriter, which is pretty nasty.
Yeah, and then since you're in blue deck and you're running Aether Leak, you might as well run Ancestral Council, which fetches you parts of the combo.
Yeah, and just in general, all these cards are just kind of good, but provided that you probably build around the Aether Leak and have the requisite kind of deck to play it. Because, I mean, Pensive Songwriter is a pretty good card. Lots of natural synergy with Ancestral Council. Ancestral Council also a reasonably good card.
I mean, you can also run Conjure Realities to fetch another part of the combo, although it doesn't fetch Aether Leak. So, you're halfway to basically the same shell that 8-Sack uses.
Yeah, There's definitely a lot of very powerful stuff in Rug colors to support this kind of spell/creature hybrid plan. And talking about like 8-sack kind of ideas, you also have Fire True Seeker, which also likes Aether Leak quite a bit since you can free cast 2 spells. Again, the body is nice, but not really the reason you're playing Fire True Seeker.
Yeah, but we haven't seen the combo in action yet, so I guess time will tell if the combo is actually good or not.
Yeah, but by my reckoning, at least, I think this is one of the combos that's like, yeah, you have everything there. It's just very free in general, since all the cards you're playing are good, which is really rare as far as combos go.
But anyways, I think we're done talking about the unbans, so let's talk about some actual bans. So first of all, the green-white creature vomit, as you know, was the talk of the town last GP.
Yeah, I think it's just kind of the undisputed best deck in the format for the last 2 GPs. To the point where it's like, I don't think really anyone was even arguing for it not being the best deck. I definitely had weaknesses, but it was just such an innately powerful deck.
Yeah, the weaknesses were the deck losing to itself and the pilots not being very good with the deck.
Yeah, it definitely felt like there was kind of few ways to deal with it. I mean, obviously, Wraths were incredible against the deck, with Violent Collapse basically always wiping the entire opponent's board.
Yeah, because you have to use Denarian Charm to protect against Violent Collapse, and you really don't want to be holding up mana in that deck. And of course, the reason that you were so good at protecting against board wipes was because you had Daisy, which could sacrifice herself for free to give your entire board indestructible for a turn. Now Daisy has been nerfed so that the ability costs 1 green to activate in addition to sacking her, so it's a lot harder to protect your board for free now.
Yeah, and in addition to that, we have Gillo being nerfed from +2/+2 to +1/+1. Raise reinforcement no longer free casting. Now you need to pay a green and white, as well as trial reinforcements. Well, kind of being changed in response to a different card in the cycle being changed rather than its role here is another kind of hit to the deck.
Yeah, but the good news for me at least is that the deck didn't actually get hit as hard as I expected it to, because I was expecting Charisma's Companion and Seek the Lost Child to get nerfed, but it didn't this patch, so I'm pretty happy about that. And the core of the deck is still there. Like, Mozekef is still good. Gillo, even though it doesn't give +2/+2, still gives trample. So the core plan of spamming the board with creatures and then using Mozekef to push for the win is still there.
Yeah, and Gillo and Daisy, again, still get the buff. Core Light Champion is still incredible. Good as a companion, as you mentioned. Still same as before, and still makes the same degenerate board states as before.
Yeah.
Though with a bit worse high end, with Gillo probably not killing you on turn 3 anymore. Probably going to be killing more on turn 4, which is a lot more reasonable.
Unfortunately, Raids is probably not playable in this deck anymore because the non-EHSable slots in the deck are really precious, and post-nerf Raids is still pretty good in deck because a lot of the times you actually just end up turn hardcast Raids. But now that you have the absolutely busted mode, can't really afford to run it with EHS anymore.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely could, as you mentioned, just 4 creatures land step is fine. And it's not like 2 mana is like this insane amount of mana that you can pay for with the alternate mode.
Yeah, but unfortunately, green-white is actually really annoying because you can't make raise mana off a single Crewmaster's Companion tap.
And also in addition to EHS being kind of awkward, if it sees a raise off the top, Seek the Lost Child is similarly not really liking seeing raise off the top.
Yeah, I've exiled way more than my fair number of raise reinforcements from Seek the Lost Child during the last GP. And trial recruitment is actually one of the weaker cards in the deck because I would constantly cut it during sideboarding. And so mostly only run it in the deck for density purposes, because to get the nut draw with Crewmaster's Companion, you need a 1-mana card that makes 2 bodies, and there's actually not that many in the format. It's basically just Overgrowth Guardian and Seek the Lost Child with a fetch. And without trial recruitment, you're basically down 2 copies of that sort of effect. I'm not sure how much of a difference it would make, but it is a small loss in consistency.
Yeah, and admittedly, it's possible the deck should have been playing more trial recruitments, because trial recruitment is kind of a messed up card. At the same time, giving your opponent a card is a notable downside when you are kind of on this A plus B plan. But now you don't have to kind of question yourself on how many trial reinforcements you have to trial recruitments you play because, well, costly mana.
Yeah.
But I think the changes actually are pretty easy for the deck. I think you're just swapping out raise reinforcements and trial recruitments, as well as like a Daisy and a Gillo for Brothers Reunion and Underpass Sentinel as 2 just really strong cards in general.
The combination of EHS and Brothers Union has been making waves in a lot of other green-white creature-based decks, like green-white counters. So I guess this deck is just another one in a long line of these sorts of decks. If you have a Mozekef plus a Brothers Union out, it's kind of awkward, but most of the time it doesn't really matter too much.
Yeah, a lot of times that single turn of like not attacking with 2 or 3 creatures doesn't really matter in terms of triggering Mezca. And the kind of upside you get at Brothers Reunion is pretty huge. Additionally, in the case that you don't have a good draw with Critter's Companion, something like turn 1 Overgrowth Guardian into turn 2 Brothers Reunion has that like very nice ability to get 2 triggers off Brothers Reunion immediately.
Yeah.
Which is only really doable in Hounds. As far as Brothers Souls type decks work, and with Hounds only be able to do it if they hit a haste creature off the top. So that gives you kind of another nut draw, which is probably worth the kind of mana awkwardness with Mezca.
I mean, Green-White Creature Vomit is just a deck that tries to abuse the fact that it can nut draw super hard.
Yeah, and another thing that Brothers Reunion and Unpassed Sentinel does is it gives you quite a bit more of a backbone, where, especially with Seek the Lost Child, giving you so much value, as well as like Gillo replacing itself, and Coal Champion, of course, punching above its weight class in every deck it's in.
And of course, EHS just existing.
You can just get a lot of value in the deck, so it doesn't definitely seem much more possible to like kind of play a very long game where your opponent's playing their removal and the mid-range sets, and you're just managing to keep up now that you're on like slightly more neatly powerful cards. Since although Raise Reinforcements does have pretty good late game utility, it does need some other thing to work with it. Same with Trial Recruitments.
Yeah. Also, something else that's really funny about this deck now, Seek Lost Child, Brothers Union, and Endless Helpless Souls are all cards that look at the top X cards and do something with them, but they all use different methods of looking. Like, EHS just looks, Brothers Union reveals, and Seek straight up exiles them. So, just make sure you don't actually give yourself game rule violations for using the wrong way of looking at the cards.
So, I think outside of kind of Creature Vomit, I would guess that Gillo probably doesn't see much play anymore, where a lot of the decks that kind of played some random Gillos weren't quite as high as Gillo as they kind of need to be, since dropping down from +2/+2 to +1/+1 is a pretty major change.
Yeah. I mean, the only other deck that was really playing Gillo was Legends Aggro, right? And they have Mattia now, so they don't really need Gillo.
I think the Green-White counters decks were also playing Gillo occasionally.
Yeah, I guess they don't play it now because it's just not enough of a payoff for getting 5 differently named creatures into play. Because for those decks, like, that's an actual condition. For Creature Vomit, it's just Thursday.
Yeah, I think now it's more balanced around the ETB actually being there than it used to be. Where I think previously the decks that played it had a lot more leeway, because worst case scenario gets an additional draw. Where even if they don't get the +2/+2, whatever. So when you get a deck like Green-White Creature Vomit that just gets both, it kind of breaks in half.
Yeah.
And there's definitely a cost to play Gillo, since you do kind of need a fair amount of different names. So like one of the reasons that the deck's playing Silent Wanderer is to activate Gillo. I think a lot of the Green-White counters decks were kind of mixing up their 1-drop suite a fair bit to get Gillo to be more easily active.
Yeah.
They are also doing that for Astral and Familiar to get more creature types. So maybe Gillo is still worth it just as a trample, because there are some pretty powerful cards like Astral and Familiar that don't have trample but are very large even without Gillo.
Yeah. But anyways, I think we spent long enough talking about these changes, so moving on. We mentioned how Recruitment is part of a cycle of changes. Well, we're going to introduce all the other cards in that cycle now.
Yeah, so the entire cycle gets 1 cheaper if you've drawn 2 cards during the turn, which is a very interesting condition in general, since it's a lot harder than it seems. There's definitely ways to do it very easily. Obviously, you get a draw from your draw step, so you just need to find 1 draw if you're casting your turn. But how you want to find that second draw is a bit of a major question, since options like Sage's Ashes and Water Tome and Social Graces all have their own kind of particularities.
Yeah, so going through the changes in order, first we have Trial Recruitment, which we already talked about a bit previously.
Yeah, but now it does a very different thing, and that makes 3 soldiers at sorcery speed. I think this card can definitely see some play, probably because it makes soldiers, which is a very valuable creature type for going wide, between Duelist Poise and Golden Company Tactics, being 2 very solid anthems, as well as just kind of being on rate for making 3 bodies.
Yeah, I guess.
It's definitely not efficient at 3 mana, but it's kind of getting there. If you really want to live in kind of dreamland scenarios, you can talk about like blue-white soldier knights. You play a knight on turn 1, turn 2 you attack, social graces, you get a second draw for the turn, play Trial Recruitment, untap, Golden Company Tactics, put 3 +1/+1 counters on all you guys, attack for 16 or whatnot.
Spicy.
Of course, that does require you to play Social Graces, which is... I'm not sure if that's necessarily the quality you want in Soldiers.
Yeah.
But just generally, the amount of anthems soldiers have that are really efficient does make this card much more attractive.
I mean, do you still play this card even if you basically have no chances of triggering the Foresight? Because I feel like in a lot of soldier aggro decks, they probably just don't have any good ways of enabling the Foresight.
Yeah, I don't think it's unreasonable, to be completely honest. That is playing it without the second draw, but you definitely would prefer having the second draw. Though at the same time, maybe it is just powerful enough that you can just play Watered Tome or what have you to get a turn 2 trial recruitment to set up that turn 3 like Duelist Poise or Golden Company Tactics. Because that, even just without a 1-drop, that's still pretty scary to curve.
Yeah, but then you're playing Watered Tome in your aggro deck.
You are, but these kind of go why tribal decks are a bit different. I don't think you're necessarily setting up a turn 4 kill. And this even sets up a turn 4 kill regardless. Soldiers are a bit unique in that they don't actually mind the artifacts as much as other decks because Founding Hero is such a good card.
Right.
And oftentimes the artifact part of Founding Hero is more difficult than the enchantment. Not always, but oftentimes. So the combination of Watered Tome and Duelist Poise helps you out there.
Yeah.
Moving forward, though, Fire Burst, previously one of the few instant speed burn spells that Burn could play.
Yeah.
Now no longer instant speed, and is now an Arc Lightning improvement.
Yeah, and also it no longer costs 1 mana, so Burn's not playing this anymore.
Yeah, definitely not.
Burn's probably just going to move down to the next best Lava Spike, which is probably Searing Grace in decks that have fetch lands.
Yeah, possibly. Keeping up that instant speed burn spell count is kind of nice, just because there are quite a few times when having instant speed is pretty relevant for burn.
Yeah, playing around counters especially. Unfortunately, Prowess is probably a lot more screwed by this change because they care about instant speed way more.
Yeah, getting the Prowess triggers mid-combat is definitely more valuable in Prowess than in burn. What it's been changed to is quite interesting, but also kind of specific in what it's used for. Where I think basically the main use of this card is, again, having something like a Water Tome, turn 1, and then you turn 2, this versus aggro.
Ooh. Is that any better than Solar Flare, honestly?
I think it's a lot of aggro boards that just clears their board, whereas Solar Flare doesn't.
Right.
And also Solar Flare is 2 colors. Admittedly, Solar Flare is probably going to be the better card in general, but potentially just not in green.
I mean, there's also Metal Munch if you want to kill 2 small guys, so you need to kill 1 medium guy and 1 small guy for this thing to be better than either one of those things.
Yeah, but taking the middle ground isn't the worst thing. Being able to kill both an X3 and X2 and an X1 is pretty nice.
Yeah.
Admittedly, that's a very specific niche, but that's potentially a deck if you want to play like red box shells, in which you want Water Tome anyways. That's potentially worthwhile. It is also better at triggering Social Graces if you want to try that out.
Yeah, Social Graces after you've already drawn a card.
Yeah, admittedly, you're probably not casting on the super cheap, but potentially if you're in like a mid-range deck that wants Social Graces, maybe this comes into play.
Yeah.
Salt Ancient Knowledge is the blue version of the cycle. This was the card that previously 1-mana draw 2, pretty busted. Much less busted now, but it is kind of interesting as basically the only instant speed blue recursion in the format.
Yeah.
Admittedly, again, that's a pretty minor niche since, well, you do have Whisperwood Exploration if you're in black-green, which are pretty common pairings with blue, but it's definitely niche nonetheless.
Yeah, and then we have the 2 cards that didn't see play from the cycle, so the Descent upon Entomb.
Unfortunately, this card is not going to be playable. Where 1-mana discard, I think, is generally good enough that you don't really want a conditional version. It's made it pretty awkward by the fact that you can't play this on turn 1 like ever.
Yeah.
Which is really where you want to be casting 1-mana discard.
And then the final card of the cycle, Oasis Grandeur. Has that card ever seen play?
I don't think so. I think it let you fetch 2 basics or deserts.
Well, is it playable now?
Probably not. It does kind of have an interesting use case in fetching Nareba. That was kind of an interesting utility land that it also ramps you to.
Yeah,
but
I guess.
Unfortunately, I think that really if you're not fetching a desert, it's pretty awkward. Or basic, I guess, but I don't know if you really want to be sideboarding basics for this.
Yeah. If you're in a desert deck, then you probably aren't drawing that many extra cards.
Yeah. Similarly, it gets kind of hurt by the fact that green decks generally don't want to play these kind of derpy 1 mana draw card artifacts.
Yeah.
That's all for this month's changes. But there was a patch the previous month before the GP that wasn't covered. Some of the changes that happened included a rework of Orchestrate, or minor rework, at the very least.
Yeah.
With the Orchestrate card now coming out of exile when you resolve the spell, rather than when you cast the spell or your next spell.
So the main thing that this changes is that counter spells can now delay the Orchestrate from coming out.
Yeah, so instead of getting both your spells immediately, if the spell that you're kind of relying on to kind of take that Orchestrate out from exile gets countered, well, it's always stranded there. Isn't really too big of a deal in general, but does have some implication on how the cards work in general.
Yeah, so like sometimes burn decks will orchestrate Storm Surge in order to play around counter spells, but no, they can't really do that.
Yeah, they have Storm Surge and one other card in hand, and they try and orchestrate Storm Surge and then cast another spell. Well, now that doesn't work too well if it gets countered, since they'll need to draw another spell to get it off of exile. I just think some cards got kind of reworked because they don't work as intended anymore. So probably the largest change is Return to Form, which is a Wrath, which obviously changes up how it works, because if you play creature into it, then previously the Orchestrate trigger will happen and it will blow up the board before the creature resolves. Now it's blowing up after. So to compensate for that, Return to Form now gives something indestructible.
So how does Return to Form compare to the other Wraths in the format?
I think in general compares actually pretty well for a couple reasons. First of all, you do have the kind of staple Wrath of God kind of destroy all creatures for 4 mana effect.
Yeah.
But Return to Form has a couple of upsides over that, since it gives something indestructible. And secondly, it can hit non-creature permanents. So if you're playing against some artifact deck that has all the cards be artifacts, then well, you can blow up artifacts, which you'd be pretty happy about. But with a normal Wrath, you would not be. There's the downside of it need to be orchestrated to be 4 mana, which is a bit awkward into aggro, potentially.
Basically means that this thing isn't a 4 mana Wrath because you can't get it down in turn 4.
Yeah, and that's definitely some pretty major downside. But at the same time, it is still practically 4 mana. You're only spending 4 mana to cast it. And it having Orchestrate isn't all downside, since it does actually let you do some neat things like have an instant speed Wrath.
Right.
So you can orchestrate your turn, then on like 5 mana, hold up 1 mana, pass, and then your opponent does something scary, you play an opt, and decide what you want to kill. And here you have like a Kaelin in play. Well, you give your head Kaelin indestructible, and you're pretty happy about that too.
Right.
Another card that got a change, though I think less so because of the Orchestrate changes. I just got a rework because it was kind of didn't have a fair use case scenario. Is Blessing Valor, which used to be a giant growth that orchestrated. Now it does some more fancy stuff.
Yeah, and the Orchestrate cost also got changed, so now it looks super awkward. But basically you need to tap creatures so that their total colors add up to red and white, instead of just tapping a single red or white creature.
Yeah, so the pretty natural thing to do is play red and white creatures, obviously.
Yeah.
Then you get to tap them, Orchestrate Blessing Valor, which is pretty neat. And then you get a free haste enabler, which is pretty attractive, to be honest.
Yeah, you can do something like turn 2, orchestrate this, and then next turn play something out, and then win with everything.
Yeah, and there are actually a fair number of decent red-white cards. On 2, you have Champion of the Red Dawn and Commander of the Cavalry, which are both pretty nice, as well as Sandbluff Insider, which is also pretty solid, though all those cards do go in different decks, so maybe there's some tension there.
Yeah.
On 3, you have some interesting cards in Elon Meva, as well as Wraither, which has some pretty nice synergy just because it's a young Pyromancer type effect. And Elon Meva just giving haste, getting the clock down nice and quick. And then if you want to get to more like normal, I guess, kind of threats, you can talk about stuff like Merciless Shieldbreaker, which is in color, Infectious Ego, if you're in Mardu.
Nice.
Which are both pretty nasty cards to give haste.
Yeah.
And then even just by itself, the combat trick isn't bad. I mean, plus 2/+7 first strike is actually pretty solid. Especially if you like have some prowess creatures, giving them first strike is really nasty if anyone tries to trade with you. Admittedly, white isn't the best color for prowess in general, but at the same time, you do have some kind of interesting white cards with Centered Acolyte and Sword and Board.
Yeah, I mean, just look at the Mardu prowess deck from last GP. That thing was mainly red, white, splashing black for the Ashen Gates.
Unfortunately, Sentinel's Acolyte and Master of the Three Paths aren't entirely happy with busting Valor, or at least have some anti-synergy, because, well, you kind of need to be giving haste during your main phase, just with how Orchestrate works. So there is some awkwardness there, but it still kind of works as a buffer if you already have creatures on the board.
Yeah.
And maybe importantly, it's free, so you can have some more degenerate kind of opening lines, which Paris always likes.
And speaking of degeneracy, we have Ardy's Invocation, which is arguably the biggest benefactor of the Orchestrate change. And that's actually quite ironic because Ardy's Invocation got nerfed right after it got changed in the May Madness patch. It used to care about mana value, but now it cares about mana spent.
Yeah, it's a bit funny that Ardy's Invocation gets a pretty big buff from the Orchestrate changes. I think in general it's a buff, particularly because you can set up your following turns really nicely with an Ardy's Invocation Orchestrate.
Because now if you play a creature, you can stack the trigger so that the creature's ETB resolves before Ardy's Invocation resolves.
Yeah, so you can do stuff like turn 2, Orchestrate Ardy's Invocation, turn 3, Ancestral Council, stack the triggers for that Ancestral Council searches before Ardy's. So Ancestral Council can grab a Warlock's Beyond, or what have you, and then you can cast that off the Ardy's Invocation or Songwriter if you have it.
Yeah.
And those are the kind of lines that the new 8-sack deck kind of messes around with.
Yeah, I mean, the new 8-sack deck is probably the closest we'll get to Yu-Gi-Oh! In Magic the Gathering.
Yeah, definitely a lot of very crazy, long lines that end up in a lot of different places, depending on how many resources you have, which does remind me a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh!
Yeah, but the other use case for Ardy's Invocation in that deck is just getting out on turn 2 Pensive Songwriter, which starts off the chain.
Yeah, and that's more kind of typical of Ardy's Invocation as it used to be a ritual. It does have a lot more utility now as a recast rather than a ritual, and the Orchestrate being more real on this version of the card, since the previous version of the card, when I just added 3 mana of any card, I don't think I ever saw it ritualed. Orchestrated.
I mean, I have orchestrated it before when I'm running out of cards in my Infused deck and I wanted to at least somewhat try to play around counter spells. But yeah, if you're orchestrating old Ardy's Invocation, I mean that something has gone wrong and you're desperately trying to get back into the game.
Yeah, oftentimes the decks that use Ardy's Invocation, at least the old version, was also playing Shadundra Sanctuary, which doesn't help you orchestrate.
Yeah.
But now this new Ardy's Invocation definitely makes much better use of the Orchestrate.
Also, Ardy's Invocation is just a really good card to cast off any card that free casts, so like Conjure Realities. If you conjure for Ardy's Invocation, now you can get out a 5-drop.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, Ardy's Invocation is kind of combo bait, where this card sets up so much like silly stuff. Keone is another example of a card that really likes to play with Ardy's Invocation.
Yeah.
But we'll see if anything happens with it. I'm personally not super inclined to build around it just because it's so, like, I find it to be kind of obviously broken.
Yeah. If Ardy's Invocation gets hit, does Turbo 8-sack just get killed?
I don't know. I mean, mind that Turbo 8-sack is just kind of a better version of the old 8-sack, and I think that remains the case even without Ardy's Invocation. Mind that the old 8-sack was not a good deck.
Despite winning a GP?
Yeah, it might have won a GP, but it was not a good deck. There's definitely a lot of problems with the old 8-sack build, including that the early game was incredibly finicky, and Ardy's Invocation being part of this new 8-sack deck early game kind of has like, losing it doesn't mean much. Additionally, the new 8-sack deck being able to play mana dorks, since the quick lines to a 5-drop involve 3 drops, makes that a lot nicer. So you don't need to kind of mess around with discards and not advance your game plan as you search for Fate Stitcher.
Yeah.
You can just go straight through to a 3-drop. Would definitely change up the deck quite a bit, though.
Yeah. I think that's everything in the patch.
And both patches, even.
Yeah. So, thoughts about the patch? I mean, I know you have some really choice words about Chigau.
Yeah, I'm definitely not big on Chigau as a card. I'd be a bit surprised if it's ban-worthy on power level. Otherwise, it seems pretty normal as far as patches go. Definitely there's a few cards that I'm a bit surprised weren't hit. Critters Companion, Seek the Lost Child. I mean, Seek the Lost Child is marked for rework, to my understanding, so maybe it'll get changed shortly.
Yeah.
But both those cards are pretty insane, to the point that, like, Creature Vomit having 4 cards being hit is just, like, kind of whatever. where we kind of sat down for like 15-20 minutes before recording, and we're like, okay, well, how do we make a new Creature Vomit deck? And I'm like, what if you just like played Brothers Reunion and Underpass?
Yeah.
And we tested it, and I was like, yeah, this is good. Yeah, it's like normal Creature Vomit stuff.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I'm actually kind of happy that Green White Creature Vomit didn't get nerfed too hard, and the deck still exists, because it's my pet deck, and it might be broken, but it's fun for me to play it, at least. I'm not sure if it's fun for people to play against it.
That seems to be a common trend as far as your pet decks go.
Yeah, just play the broken deck that you had me until it gets nerfed.
Infuse? Interesting. What's next? Rejuvenation? Interesting. What's next? Rejuveless Rejuve? I'm not sure if I'd call any of these decks fair, but...
Yeah. I think most of the other changes just don't really change much, because they were either rules cleanup type reworks, or they were hitting a deck that wasn't really relevant that much anyways, except for the card recruitment cycle changes. I mean, those ones hit pretty hard, but yeah.
I think in general, I'm pretty happy with all of these changes. The trial recruitment cycle, even if the cards are probably less played after the rework, I think in general that cycle just wasn't super healthy. Maybe you could make an argument for Fire Burst being a very like interesting card, but definitely Consulting Ancient Knowledge and trial recruitments definitely opened the doors to a lot of abuse. Gillo is another card that was also, I think, just kind of waiting to be like abused in a shell that like was more so built around it than kind of typical aggro shells that had a bit of difficulty triggering the 5 creature condition.
Yeah.
I mean, definitely getting cards unbanned is always nice. Just having a small ban list makes it easier to read. Less chance of people randomly finding the card and be like, oh, I should play this card. Because that's happened to me a few times where I found, oh, this busted card that I should definitely be playing and building around. And then I double check and it's banned. And I'm like, oh, well, there goes this deck.
I mean, it's easier to maintain spell balance when you can literally just change the cards.
Yeah, and Aether Leak, I definitely hope, kind of does interesting stuff. I mean, we kind of highlighted a pretty degenerate thing, but at the same time, it is a pretty interesting effect in general.
Yeah.
And I think it's also pretty appropriately costed at 1 in blue, though maybe it's undercosted, who knows. But it's definitely the kind of card that's pretty easy to build around and does a lot of cool things.
Yeah. But anyways, I think we've talked a lot enough, so yeah, that's the June balance patches.
As well as the part 2 of the May balance patches.